Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for the ones at the audience that are following us at this YouTube, on our YouTube channel and following this event, Decarbonization and the Path to a Sustainable Future, Advancing Biofuels Agenda. This is our second event in this platform that the New York Climate Week offers us. So we are very, very happy to be and to have the opportunity to discuss biofuels, this thrilling topic that has to be part of the decarbonization path around the globe. And probably Brazil is one of the most or the better positioned to lead this agenda of the biofuels and biogenic carbon as a technological route to decarbonize both the industry and the economy. And it's our belief in the E Plus Energy Transition Institute that without profiting from biogenic carbon in all its potential, it's not going to be really possible to get to net zero within a cost-effective and payable or not so expensive solution. So biogenic carbon and this discussion has a lot to do with net zero, has a lot to do with presenting our country, Brazil, as one of the leaders of this agenda. And just to introduce to you and to the rest of the audience, who is E Plus Institute on Energy Transition. We are a think tank based in Brazil, in São Paulo. We are now almost 20 people working to foster Brazil as a leader in this energy transition and industrial transformation topic. And our agenda has a lot to do with promoting the industry decarbonization, biofuels, biogenic routes as a means of developing economic development, and not only as a burden that will cost a lot of money and not bring jobs and not bring any kind of sustainable future to our country and to the globe in the end. So this is more or less who we are. I'm Rosana Santos. I'll try to moderate and to bring to you some insights and some good questions coming from these wonderful friends of mine that are here, the panelists. Renata Isfer, a long friend from a long time ago, very dear friend. She is the president of the Abiogás, which is the Brazilian Biogas Association. Lais, who is responsible and advisor of the Secretary of Oil and Gas and Biofuels of the Ministry of Mines and Energy. Heloísa Borges, who is the director of our energy planning company, energy planning group, energy planning intelligence company. She is the director of oil and gas and also biofuels. And Gerhard, who manages this topic with the Clean Energy Ministerial. And it's a real pleasure to have you all here, such a very distinct panelist that is our luck to have you all accepting to be here and to be with us during this day. So after this quick introduction in the New York Climate Week, I'll start by one question that is been bothering me along the side of these last 2 years, trying to work and to foster this agenda of biogenic fuels and biogenic technological routes, which is we have to be sure it's going to net zero. We have to be sure it's sustainable. But there is a lot of misunderstanding around the globe how to certificate these biogenic carbon routes, how to make sure these routes are effectively sustainable, meaning the good use of water, good use of land, good use of work labor, and so on and so forth. But this said, this is possible. And how do we certificate how we get there and how we get the world to understand that these biogenic routes are as important as any other route? Biomethane, for example, Renata, I know you're going to talk about it. Biomethane is not only a replacement for biogas or sorry, for natural gas, but also can be used by the steel making companies to make green steel. So let's discuss a little bit the question: how important is the establishment of a certification system for Brazilian biofuels, and what are the steps needed to implement it? I will start by asking you, Lais, if you want to develop a little bit around this topic, and right after Renata, if you can also complement and add to Lais' questions. Lais?
Thank you so much, Rosanna, for the invitation to be here today. It's always a pleasure to be in panel with a lot of women like Renata, Eloisa, and of course you. But I'm a good friend of Gerhard, so I'm glad to be here with him too. And hopefully, you're gonna be all together in person in Foz do Iguaçu, where you're gonna host the G20, the Energy Transition Working Group that is leading by this, co-leading by this Ministry of Mines and Energy. And as you told, I am advisor for the Secretary of the Oil, Natural Gas, and Biofuels. I work directly with Secretary Pietro, and I started my history with the ministry when I was working with Marlon Arraes, who is now the director of biofuels. And we had the discussion about the Renova Bio, which is benchmarking, a real benchmark for biofuels in the world, I can say. Because when we were designing this, we congregate the academia, the industry, and also of course, the government perspectives in order to have a sophisticated program that is based on the life cycle analysis. So we are not just incentivizing the different pathways of biofuels like other programs around the world, but we um, we created a system where the producers of biofuels can include all the inputs of their production in the system, in the Renova Calc. And based on that, there is a energy efficient grade score. And that generates the decarbonization credits that are traded in the stock market. So in order to the producers to have the opportunity to join the program, they have to be certificate. And that's the point that is really important for us to have this kind of certification in the Renova Bio program. And we only work with the ones that are registered in the rural environmental system that we have in Brazil. So we're not talking about deforestation to produce the biofuels. And since they started this movement of fuel versus fuel in the world, we are trying to show our side, our natural resources, our natural advantage to produce biofuels. And recently, the Energy Task 39, that is led by Professor Glaucia from the São Paulo University, showed us a new study showing that we have enough land to produce biofuels. So it's not about that. It's about methodology. It's about raising the debate. So inside the discussions in the priority three in the energy transition working group, we were very glad to announce that we have this new report launched by the International Energy Agency about carbon accounting to show the different methodologies implemented in Corsia, in GREET, and Renova Bio, and others, and so on, to make sure that we know that the difference between the methodologies, but we can try to harmonize them. We don't need to penalize the countries that are still developing themselves and they need to produce biofuels from biomass. It's a different perspective that the countries that can produce um, e-fuels or synthetic fuels from other feedstocks. But in the case of Brazil, it's important for us to make sure that we do have a sustainable production, certified production, and we can compete with the ones that are produced in other developed countries and use another technology. So one another important point about Renova Bio, and it's also uh, internalizing the Fuel of the Future program, is that we have our targets, our mandates based on uh, um, GNG GHG carbon reductions emissions. So we're not talking about to benefit one technology, but we are trying to seek which one is better in terms of carbon emissions or to reduce the carbon emissions. So that's the point that we think it's great to emphasize about the Brazilian biofuels, and hopefully this debate can be further discussed in Foz do Iguaçu, and we can have a perspective that includes every technology and not exclude the technologies that we are good at. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lais. And also, I think it's not a matter of discussing either biofuels or e-fuels. It's what is the cheapest solution for each geography to have access to near zero fuels in general. And what you said on it has to be sustainable, it has to be certified, but it has also to be democratic. So this is more or less, I think, what you are trying to do with Renova Bio, with all the adaptations that we have to have, and also with the bill that just passed at the Congress, the future fuel for the future. Fuel for the Future bill. Renata, I would love also to hear your perspective on that, because I know you've been traveling around the globe and really preaching this agenda around the globe, and a lot can be done from your associates, the associates of the Biogás. So please give us your insights on this certification matter and how to make our country proud of it. You are on mute, Renata. You're on mute. You are still on mute.
Okay, I
Great,
go. Good
great.
morning for everyone, and thank you, Rosanna, for the invitation to be here today. It's an honor to participate in these discussions. First of all, you asked about the importance, and I think it's fair to say that there are two big motives for us to have certification. On one hand, if you compare sometimes biomethane with natural gas, even though they are the same, they have the same chemical composition, they have one difference: the the fact that biomethane it is renewable. But when you mix it in the grid or in the pipeline, or if you have to somehow prove that when you bought your biomethane, it was biogenic carbon and not a fossil gas. And for that, it's one of the reasons that it's important to have a certification, so you can guarantee that there was some renewable energy made and that it integrated the grid, making a decarbonization. The second part is because, at least here in Brazil, most of the time, biomethane is more expensive than natural gas. And the difference of the price, it's something that sometimes some some of the demand that wants gas, it doesn't want the decarbonization part. They just want to generate energy. And sometimes someone who is not on the grid and who is somewhere else or maybe in another country, they need the certification in order to accomplish their target of decarbonization. So you could have a different market for the certificate and for the fuel itself. So the thing is, there's a lot of possible kinds of certification going on. You have RenovaBio, which is a Brazilian thing, and I was lucky to be involved in its creation as well. But it's a different kind that not actually it's not like the same thing as a carbon market, and it's not the same thing as an origin certificate because it has a demand specific. It has for the liquid fuels distribution, they have a target to buy, to buy some of these CBIOs, and then to decarbonize their production, their part of the liquid fuels market. Then you have carbon market, which we don't have mandate one in Brazil. There's only voluntary in Brazil so far, but the bill is in Congress, and hopefully it'll be voted not long. It's been at a standby for too long now in the Congress, and we hope to see it. But it will tell you exactly how much carbon you are not emitting because of some source of energy, how much you are decarbonizing, and that will be important because some industries and some consumers actually they will have if they pollute more than a volume that's fixed in the law, they will have to compensate somehow, and one of the forms of this compensation is by the certificates. When you look at an origin certificate, it's a different thing. You're looking more to guarantee that that molecule is renewable and that you want to prove that you use it renewable fuel. So the great part is like for us right now, we do have RenovaBio, we have carbon market on a bio, and we got approved the fuel of the future, which demands that an origin certificate for biomethane is made, so we can use it to confirm even for scope 1, just to tell, hey, here I used biomethane, I used the green biofuel. So when you look at the steps right now, if you're trying to look for this origin certification, we need to have some regulation from the government that will have to take place after the bill is actually signed and published. And the main thing about that is that we need to make sure that this certificate is reliable, that this certificate can be, how do I say that? You can track it, trackable maybe, rastreável, I'm not sure.
Trackable.
You can trackable. You can track that it actually came for a biofuel production, for I don't know, for some residue that was turned into biomethane. And we need to be fungible. It needs to be able to be interchangeable with other carbon markets or other different kind of markets in order to be accepted for all of the world. Right now, there's some prejudice, I would say, against some questions about biomethane in some places, especially outside of Brazil, abroad. For example, there is this theory that if you accept a certificate of biomethane, you're actually motivating people to produce more residues. But that could make sense in a perfect society where all of the residues are already being used for biogas. But when you look over to Brazil, where 40% of all of the garbage here is sent just anywhere in a piece of land, and it pollutes the rivers, it pollutes the air, it pollutes everything. You can't really compare, because when you give an incentive to biomethane, you're actually giving an incentive for someone to go there to that trash and separate what's organic and actually capture the methane that it's already going into the atmosphere. So it is a good policy. You may have to set a time standards or when do we start or up to when we do this incentive, because incentives actually they are made to be temporary. We really look forward that in the future we don't need them, but you need to think about that and see how it might be very good in developing countries, emerging countries, and even in the countries in the global north that doesn't treat all of their organic residues, because you have organic residues from farms, from industries, for residentials, and a lot of that. So another great prejudice that I see outside is not regarding actually biomethane, but it's more related to ethanol. It's the question of food versus fuel, which might make sense in some countries, but in Brazil, you never plant any more area to produce ethanol. They're just investing in new technology to produce more ethanol from in the same crop, in the same area. So it's not really something that we should concern. We should look at the reality instead of just thinking that the way the things work in one country fits all. And as Rosanna said, if we don't see other routes like biogenic methane or biogenic carbon, I'm sure it'll be much, much more difficult to reach net zero, if not impossible, and many times expensive, especially in the countries that need it, that in the global south, which are the countries that have the biggest potential and needs the energy transition to be fair and to be inclusive. And that's it.
That's great. I mean, all this thing on an agricultural country as ours, with a lot of agriculture and feedstock residues just being thrown at the nature without really proper treatment. Exploring the biomethane as a decarbonization route is actually structuring something that is completely unstructured nowadays and actually emitting methane and biomethane to the atmosphere, which is 30 times more polluting than anything else, than CO2. And I completely agree. I just want to know if Eloisa and Gerardo wants to add something, starting by you, Eloisa. I know perhaps you want to add to these questions or to these thoughts.
Yes, thank you, Rosanna. I will reinforce Lai's comments on what a pleasure it is to be here in this panel with great women and men as well. They represent well their gender, and it's always a nice talk and a nice moment to be here with all of you. And I would like to reinforce Lai's point on the importance of carbon accounting. And what we must do globally is like raise the debate, because what we have right now is a debate that it's mainly political, but it's disguised as a technical debate. So when we think about modeling and carbon accounting and the models that do that, what most people do not realize is that these models, they have embedded choices inside the models, as it's true for lots of modeling as well. But for carbon accounting, one particular model can generate like 5 different numbers of carbon intensity for the same fuel produced in the same country, just because you chose different baselines or different principles. So that's why it's very, very important for us to raise the debate and agree on general standards. Otherwise, we will not move forward. And it's important. In all decarbonization scenarios, we see that we need, I think the number is 2.5% growth per year up to 2050 in biofuels, and we're far from that. So how do we guarantee that we reach this goal? One of the main points is we have to agree on standardization for carbon accounting. And for investors, they have to know, for instance, if you invest in a sustainable aviation fuel plant in Brazil, will that be acceptable for Corsair in Europe or in the United States? Where do I go? So we need coordination, we need standardization, but more than that, we need objective criteria. We need those criteria to be verifiable, and we need to be able to measure them, and because otherwise we won't be able to compare choices, to compare technologies, to compare different routes. And the choice is important when we talk. I think it was Renata, no, it was Lais that mentioned the just transition. Or you, Rosanna, you also mentioned the ability for each country to choose its own path. If we are not able to compare this path, how can we guarantee that? So just stressing out that it seems like a technical debate, but it's far from
Far from that, yeah, sure. Do you want to add anything to this very hot topic, Gerhard?
Hi, Hosanna. Hi, everybody. Lais, very good to see you again. I remember seeing you in the United States, was it like 10 years ago? That's a long time. Anyway, so first of all, hello, everyone online. I'm actually at Climate Week, New York. New York, Brooklyn is outside the window here. Let me, I mean, everybody made excellent points. Everybody, I agree with everything that everybody said. If we step back a little bit and just acknowledge that what we should be doing is using and managing carbon as efficiently as possible, right? And people are not used to, or at least people my age, I think this is the first time I'm the oldest person. I have to get used to that now. Anyway, people, the human race, humanity, people, we're getting to the point where we need to think about planetary management and actually managing the surface of the Earth. So the first step in this process was when some researchers, some academics, they created the idea of planetary boundaries, right? So they created the idea that, and then they publish every day of the year. They publish the day of the year when we as humanity, we exceed our planetary boundary. And I don't know, I think it's in July now. So we have almost half the year that we're using resources that are stealing from the future. Okay. So that said, is we have a lot of hardworking people for many years thinking about what the future of the Earth should look like. And in order to ensure our survival, right? Because actually there was just a paper published this week which showed that we are living in one of the coldest periods of time for the Earth's history. Normally, the Earth is much warmer. Normally, the Earth or more, I shouldn't say normally, but more frequently, the Earth is a big desert. And so in order for us to survive, we need to think about managing the climate and we need to think about managing the surface of the land. And that is what should be motivating us. Unfortunately, as Eloise pointed out, that's not how it's working. What's happening is that you have countries that are trying to make themselves winners in the race to achieve decarbonization and management of our future. And those people frequently prefer technologies other than the use of biogenic carbon. And I know most of you don't know who I am, but I've been working in this international biogenic carbon space for 14 years. And I can tell you that, as Eloise said, she's right. There are people that are trying to position their industries so that biogenic carbon is not used. And if you are a country that has a lot of, say, hydro, water power, I mean, Brazil has a lot of water power, but if you're a country that has a lot of hydro and it's easy for you to electrify things, well, you want electric industries to succeed. But if you're a country that has a lot of biomass, then you should be allowed to use your biomass in a way that is demonstrably, and this is the key point, it's demonstrably sustainable. And so 14 years ago, it was totally fair, it was completely fair to ask the question, is this sustainable or not? And when we say sustainable, a big part of that is carbon accounting, but a big part of that is actually land use, water use, soil quality, human health, contribution to air. There's many, many different factors. Fortunately, many groups, many standardization bodies, professional standardization bodies, and international bodies that I have participated in have given very clear guidance on sustainability. But as Eloise pointed out, and I'll finish in a second, Hosanna, but where the policy meets the real world is in this carbon accounting evaluation. That's where the money is. Like everything else is more about preserving natural resources and the ability of natural systems to provide the air and the water, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But when it comes to the money, it comes to the investments, it comes down to a number that's going to decide whether an investment is going to be made. That's being made at the point of carbon accounting. And so there is an enormous political component to this, and I think everybody else can elaborate on this.
No, I
But
fully
right
agree.
now, let me just finish for now by saying that Brazil has done the world a service. The government of Brazil has helped the world by drawing attention to the fact that not only do we need to electrify, but we need to have everything else in our lives, clothes, plastics, glass, metal, cement, everything the production of it has to have lower emissions. And so Brazil has really put this out there forward. And I think it's because the world is changing. It used to be these carbon markets were small. But now these carbon markets are getting real. And so these carbon markets are going to be entering the trillions. And as soon as our friends in Europe start creating cross-border trade mechanisms, as soon as we start having climate protectionism, and even the United States with the Inflation Reduction Act caused a lot of our trade partners to lose their minds, things are getting real. And so then we need to actually know, well, what is it that we're talking about? And unfortunately, because carbon dioxide is an invisible, hard to trace gas, we can't just take a car and, we'll pass it through a detector and say, oh, producing this car produced these many emissions. Unfortunately, we can't do that. Sorry, Hosanna, I'm going to make another point because you got me all fired up. Okay, one more point. So a lot of economists, a lot of people say, oh, just make a carbon tax. Everything will be fine. Oh yeah, well, just tax the carbon. Everything will be fine. That sounds easy. Sure. You know, the problem, but then the question becomes, if that's so obvious, then why hasn't that happened? Well, the reason that hasn't happened is because we have not decided how to count the carbon, to tax it. And as a result, it's really good that we are meeting next week in Foz do Iguaçu, and that conversations are happening here in New York at the UN General Assembly, and conversations are happening forever now until we get this right. Or, I mean, truth is, we're always going to be fighting about this because we have two conflicting points. We have the people want to make money and people want to save. I think people want to do both, right?
And
But when the money comes in, things get tough. So I'll just finish by saying that this will be an ongoing conversation, and that we need a lot of people to help us think deeply about how to think about the carbon, measure the carbon, track the carbon, and we need society to get their head around the fact that we should have appropriate metrics and labeling and communication, and that this has to become embedded in the way we do things. So thank you for that. I'm happy to join in later in the conversation, but really impressed with everything that everybody said, and I just wanted to add a little flavor.
spicy to it. Um, there is no way we fully agree with you. Very good points. I saw some discussion, for example, at the Corsia level, discussing what additionality was, and additionality with a concept that only applies for certain types of energy system and not to the others. Of course, not to the Brazilian one, which is very awkward to have this discussion. So it has everything to do actually with countries trying to promote what their own industries can provide. And the problem is this model will concentrate further wealth. And in order to have also the wealth and a more just world or globally, in order to have a just transition that is globally speaking just, we have to let it go from some industries or in some countries and some geographies that are not sustainable by themselves, and start thinking globally, as you mentioned, Gerhard. Exactly, starting thinking globally. Oh, Lais, you want to add?
Can I add to that, Hosanna? Sorry.
Yes, sure.
I just wanted to say, right,
Lais.
so everybody talks about, the challenge, right? So people are like, well, okay, people can say, why don't we use more biogenic carbon? Well, because it's a little more expensive than fossil, right? It is more expensive. But there's ways that we can get around that. Okay. I mean, at the moment it is, but there's ways that we can get around that. And so people talk about fossil as the incumbent. And so the fossil industry sets up policies that make it harder for new industries to produce energy. It doesn't stop there, though. Wind and solar are acting like the incumbent now, too.
Solar.
Wind and solar are very defensive. They're not very open-minded. And so we have a situation where fusion, fission, nuclear, biogenic, geothermal, they have an uphill battle. Why? Because wind and solar are fighting them. It's really philosophically, and it's Shakespearean, or it's a Greek tragedy, how we're wrestling with these competing interests. Okay, thank you for that. I'll let other people talk.
Great. I really appreciate your remarks. Lais, you wanted to add something, and then after Lais, I'll pass to the next next block, just for us to discuss a little bit. Can we improve that? But Lais, before that, can please add your comments to the discussion.
So thank you for all the arguments. I think indeed it's an ongoing conversation, and our goal is to raise the conversation and to deep the conversation in Foz do Iguaçu. So hopefully you're gonna have the opportunity to talk more about that. But there is a not a silver bullet in this point. We are trying to make this more democratic, like you said, as possible. So hopefully we can get there. I also want to add that as Renata told you in the Fuels of the Future program, we also have the certification in the case of the biomethane, but we are also discussing at the steering committee inside the hydrogen program, also the certification. And once it's all approved and sanctioned by the president, we also will have a specific chapter on sustainable aviation fuel where we're going to have the discussions about the certification on SAF. So, of course, the Corsia Plus is a challenge, but we need to make sure that all this debate on certification also happen in a way to allow more investments in the industry, not only barriers in the situation, right? Because we need the certification companies to make sure that they can have all the skills and align it with the government requirements to make sure that the industry can match with all these different standards. So it's a very complex system, but I'm sure that together we're going to find good solutions on that. Thank you.
Together and with an open mind. Isn't it? My next question to all of you, starting by Renata, starting by Elo from the energy planning company in Brazil, is expanding biofuels production. What are the social and environmental challenges and benefits of expanding biofuel production? This is a very important question that ties up with what we were discussing. Is it really sustainable or not? And a lot of the prejudice that we feel against biofuels or biogenic carbon comes from a misunderstanding of the social and environmental benefits of it, if we are competing fuel versus food, or even if we are deforesting further the Amazon. And to tell you the truth, as this will be records for eternity, I will say that soya beans, cotton plantation, and cattle are the ones that are really fostering more the deforestation in the Amazon and Cerrado, and not the biogenic carbon that we are talking about here. So this will be here and record for the future. And this is me saying, yeah, I said. Hello.
Hi. Do you hear me well?
Yes, we do.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, I would like to hear some of your thoughts around this subject.
So it's such a hot topic, and I know you're as passionate about this as I am. And with the growth of the attention, the focus on clean energy and bioenergy and biomass, we see like some people trying to readdress the food versus fuel debate. Of course, there is a growth in bioenergy demand and food demand. But as Laís already said, for Brazil, it's proven, we can prove mathematically that there's no there's no competition. And I'll give you a number that probably most people do not know. Over 60% of the Brazilian territory is covered by native vegetation, 64%, in fact. 58% is forest, nature forest. So most people do not realize that agro uses 33% of the Brazilian lands. The production, you mentioned the cattle, but if we look at the agribusiness itself, it's 15%. So it's not that much of the territory, and we do preserve a lot. But what we did this year in particular to try to add to this debate is to evaluate the potential for what we call in Brazil is poupa terra, so techniques that save land, so you can expand bioenergy production without without a negative effect on land use. So one of is you can recover depleted land. We can do sequential planting. So second safras. How can I say safras?
Crop.
Second crops. Thank you. Second crops. For corn, we already see, for instance, for corn ethanol, third crops. So you must remember that Brazil has a climate, soil conditions very, very good. So we can expand production without using more land. And we actually did the math. So we did the math. We were very conservative, actually, on the potential. But we showed that, for instance, if we consider only ethanol and biodiesel, we could expand production 85 billion liters of ethanol and 10 billion liters of biodiesel with zero negative land use change. We can do the same analysis for biochar. Again, using existent land, and the numbers would be the same because we can almost double the production without negative land use change. So it's important to understand that there are several layers on this debate. So first one, you can recover land. We can do it without negative land use. And the second one, we still have lots of lands to use without affecting our targets. And that's particularly true for Brazil, but also we can export this technology and this knowledge. We have Embrapa, which is a company that's focusing on understanding and developing this technology. And we are already in cooperation with several other countries with the same goal, to show that we can advance on bioenergy without negative impacts on land use. I think this is my first initial comments. Thank you, Rosanna.
Thank you, Elo. Very, very sharp to the point, as usually. Gerhard, do you want to add to this point as well? Because I think from your first comments, you must have a lot to say on this sustainable way, or that it's possible to expand the biofuels or biogenic carbon utilization without expanding the use of land. And before passing you the word, I just, Elo mentioned the biochar thing. One of the projects that we are cherishing here at ePlus is the use of degraded land, so that you get real degraded land. You bring that degraded land back to be compliant with the forest code, the Brazilian forest code, meaning creating corridors for animals and forests and so on. And with the rest of the land, we can plant and use for biogenic carbon, even biochar. And biochar is one of the roads that affects small and medium companies or steel-making companies, that they can use this technology. Hydrogen, it will be too expensive for the small and medium companies to use. And so biomethane and biochar has to be part of the equation. And today on the steel making or green steel, we only hear hydrogen, 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 and all the other routes that are also possible are being discarded as not sustainable. So we have to rethink that. And Anton, who is watching us, he brought this issue into attention. Gerhard, before speaking my guts out here, I pass the word to you.
Well, thanks again, and I'm happy to have other people speak. But yeah, so so Eloise, has been thinking about this a lot. I think about it in a similar way. She's more on the technical side of things. I'm more arguably on the political side of things. My role is to connect industry to these international processes, like the G20, like the climate conference, and yeah, and so Eloise was saying that, as has been made clear many times, that different countries have different land resources, and that Brazil has land that can be used more efficiently and more effectively. But the problem is it's again, it's like we need to have the demand side of the equation available. So there needs to be offtake for this biogenic carbon. There needs to be a market for this biogenic carbon. And so you can think of an image where you have the supply side, you have the demand side, and then there's a tube. And the issue is making that connection, making that linkage. That's where these issues around sustainability come in, right? And so what we see is that there's a lot of people that see that tube as being very narrow. They say, "Oh no, we don't have enough biomass," blah 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 blah. And it's really quite psychological. Like, people really have make up their mind about biomass about 15 years ago, and then they haven't changed their mind. And so this is why I think it's very important for what, as I said, what Brazil is doing is to open the door on these conversations, bring these conversations into a more public discussion. And specifically, if we look at the way a lot of GHG, greenhouse gas and climate policy is being made right now, it's not being made by governments. It's actually being made by unelected companies and organizations like the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, the World Resources Institute, that created the GHG protocol. And another example is the Science Based Targets Initiative. These were not created by governments. Now, are they useful? Yes, they're useful because there was a big vacuum. Because after Paris, or in the preparations for the Paris Agreement, there was no government agreement. We still don't have government agreement. That's what we were talking about before. And so you have this situation where these private sector and these NGOs have come in and filled the space with their own views on GHGs, and they're literally setting the standards, but they're not elected. There's no political power behind them. And so they can, yes, they go through a process that they try to be technical, but it ends up reflecting their value system. And sustainability, the issues around sustainability are around a value system. And there are lots and lots of tools that we can use to manage the land, like I was saying before. And so absolutely, the best thing that we can do in the global South is set up areas of the land, of the world, that are never to be used as agriculture. We're just going to set them off. And the problem is, though, is that we have areas of the world in Africa and Indonesia, arguably even in Brazil, where supposedly it's a national park or it's a national preserve, and yet, well, actually it happens in the United States, not to the same extent, but even in the national forest in the United States, people will chop that down and sell that wood, and that's illegal. The problem is enforcement and values. And so people need to, like, if you go to Indonesia, there's laws that protect all the rainforest, but they're not enforced. And so that's why I was saying earlier is we need this broader societal understanding that, we can't just not pay attention, that we have to pay attention, and we can't leave the management of the earth to people who come forward and say, oh, I'll do it. It's like, no, we have to formalize a lot of this conversation. And it's really crazy because if you think about it, there's a big hole in the world. And that hole is a international dialogue on agriculture. So there's a dialogue on aspects of agriculture, such as the health. Like, how do you know that if you're selling a crop here to there, you're not bringing in a pathogen, or you're not going to make somebody sick? So there's conversation there. And then there's conversation around energy, and bioenergy has always fallen in the gap. But we have an International Energy Association, but we don't have an International Agriculture Association. We have a Food and Agriculture Organization, but that's mission is to provide food to the world that people don't have it. It's a different mission. It's not what we're talking about. And so something that needs to happen is that energy ministers and ag ministers have to come together, and they have to agree that we need a new international agency to think about land use and to use the data, to have people that can go count trees, soil quality, water quality, combine that with all the satellite data. But again, who's doing the most on satellite data? It's actually the World Resources Institute and academics. We have to take these ideas and we have to operationalize them. And so an idea that I have started putting forward, and I know that Brazil is going to help me, is that at COP30, we need to have the first ever energy ag minister conference at COP30 so that we can actually discuss these ideas, and I'm available to moderate. Okay, so that's one of the things that we need to do. I know I didn't go into the details around the biochar and these other things, but all of these things, we all know what we need to do. We all know what needs to happen. The problem is we don't have a mechanism for reporting it out. And I'll just finish by saying that for carbon dioxide, we have a mechanism. There's the observatory in Hawaii that measures the rise in the carbon. So we know how much carbon dioxide there is in the air, right? Like when it comes to nuclear, we have a nuclear agency. Biomass is where nuclear was before we had the IAEA. We need an IAEA, or we need an IEA for land, because it's about land. And that's what, anyway, so thank you so much. I appreciate the chance.
Good thoughts.
And it's my job to be a little, I don't work for a government, so I can.
I don't
my
myself.
Job, I can say whatever.
I don't myself, so.
Okay.
That's okay. It's very challenging for us to create something that it's globally accepted, but respects the specificities of the local and the geographies, and also in a new society, in a new global society that respects differences, respect also new ways of seeing the same problem, of solving the same problem. And this is not only on energy transition or industrial transformation or climate, in everything. We have to be more respectful with differences and profit from that. With this very philosophical topic, I would like to introduce our last, let's say, topic of a block of discussion, which is using Brazil's capabilities. And how can Brazil really enhance and scale up its biofuel production and leverage its local expertise and technological advancements? I always keep saying that when we say the expression that is overused, capacity building. Capacity building is always understood something coming from the illuminated ones to the very dark ones, or something like that. And this is not it. Capacity building has to flow both ways in order for us to reach an equation that is equitable and that respects geographies and different ways of seeing the world. So with this, Renata, I would love to see and to hear from you how Abiogás and yourself, that you have a lot of experience as well and has been traveling around the globe with this agenda. What are your thoughts around how to really leverage our experience and the ways we can do and make it broad and help the world to decarbonize and make money in a way? But this is money and jobs.
Money is important because if there was no way to make money with it, it would hardly have to, we would hardly be able to advance. The thing is, first of all, I think one of the things we have talked here a lot, it was one of the main topics here, it's we have to politically get it to the point where the world recognizes the importance of the biofuels, because whenever you have like a resistance in some parts of it, it gets more difficult for you to advance, especially for consumers, for the demand. I've heard a lot of people from industry say, okay, so we are not using biomethane right now because GHG only accepts hydrogen and not biomethane. So that's one thing that we need to go over. When you look at countries like Brazil, infrastructure is always questioned. We need infrastructure. It's expensive. Our country, I mean, when you see the global north having IRA, CBAN, and a lot of other policies with subsidies for the decarbonization and for the generation of green fuels, you our country, for example, doesn't have the same opportunity to do it. Our budget is very restricted in Brazil, so we have to be creative. We try to be creative all the time because that's what's left for us. So one of the things is regarding that. Third thing, financing. Financing is a huge problem for the global south, where most of the biofuels are. We get 80 times less money for financing than the global north. How are you going to do it? And fourth of all, the other thing is what we talked in the first question. We need certification. We need to go over it and get it done in order to be able to truly grow our production and truly be able to do everything that we need to do to save the world.
Save the world.
And just one thing regarding one comment from Gerard. I believe that even though it really seems sometimes to be a war regarding technologies, and it makes me very uncomfortable, especially because there's so much decarbonize. I mean, we have so much to go on. It's almost impossible to get to net zero with today's technologies. Why are people fighting each other? Let's just try to grow everything. So we as a planet won't be able to make it. We need everyone to get all of the assets that we have, all of the routes to decarbonize. Other that will be bad for everyone because I mean it's the same atmosphere, right? So that's just one question that I needed to tell.
No, it's a sharp.
It's a very morally complicated position that we're in. I mean, seriously, that's where my head is these days, and it's very morally complicated, and we have very hardworking people around the world that are making the case for we need everything. We need to go faster. We need to do it better. We don't want to cut corners. We don't want to make mistakes, but there's an area where we should be able to explore and develop. I agree. It's and the fact that people are trying to slow things down. It hurts if you think about it. It actually Yeah, it hurts.
Can I jump in? Sorry.
Yes,
Please.
you can. Then after you, I pass the word to Laís. Okay, Lo?
No, then let's Laís, and then I'll save my comment. Sorry. Bye, Laís.
Laís.
So, in order to scale up our biofuels production and increase our technological content, I was remember when we start the conversations about the Fuel of the Future program, I was in the academia side. So we started to see a lot of investments of Brazil in research and innovation. So a lot of programs to new companies or even the universities and research institutes in order to provide this creative component that Renata just said. Because, of course, we don't have enough money like the United States to have a program like the Inflation Reduction Act. We don't have a Green Deal like the European Union. So we do have to uh, make sure that we have investments in research and innovation, development and innovation. And one research that was back the last 10 days, 10 years, sorry, is the Macaúba projects in many different federal universities. So this it's going to be a game changer if it is applied in a correct way, because we can have a reforestation with Macaúba is one of the greatest feedstocks to produce not biodiesel but also the SAF. We have some announcements from Acelen that's going to use the HEFA pathway with Macaúba. So hopefully it's going to be a huge potential for the new biofuels production in Brazil. You also talked about the biochar. We had been discussing with Embrapa many projects that are taking place in this biochar too. So it's another component in these new discussions. And once the Fuel of the Future is sanctioned by the president, we're going to have many infra-legal instruments to work with the ANP, our national petroleum agents, and of course EPA is going to be part of the discussions along with our national civil aviation. But one point is that we already have a constitutional amend in order to have a tariff differentiation comparing to fossil fuels. So we're going to think about it, that we're going to have to work with another ministries here to make sure that all the investments that we think are going to raise with the Fuels of the Future program, we expected 200 billion reais in investments only when we are talking about all these new and sustainable fuels that are involved in this program. So we need to figure out how to make it's good for the government, but also good for the industry, new investors. And that's our commitment from the Ministry of Mines and Energy, that we're working hard and we're doing our best to have all the good opportunities to increase our biofuels production. So I think that's the message that I wanted to highlight.
Thank you so much, Laís. Yeah, we are here to help the agenda, and we are here to help the discussions. And this panel, for example, is I don't know, a place or a platform where all those ideas can be well reflected, well thought, and different points of view can appear even during the questions that may appear in the end. Elo, if you want now to jump in, please.
Thank you, Rosana. Sorry, Laís. The point I wanted to make, and then I'll address the question, is that what most people fail to understand is that being successful in fighting climate change is a collaborative game. It's not a competitive game. And as long as the debate is fragmented, globally, we will not be able to collaborate. And that's why we stress so much in Brazil the importance of being agnostic, on accepting different pathways, on accepting that countries have different starting points and they have different resources to accomplish our ambitions in general. So as long as we keep the debate fragmented and well, I'm Brazilian, so I usually compare it to soccer games. So football fans, as long as we treat technologies and solutions as teams where we cheer for one and we hope the other one fails, we will not reach our goal. So we have to cheer for everybody. We need all solutions to succeed. So if you look at all scenarios, all net zero scenarios, no matter if you're looking at IRENA, IEA, Brazilian scenarios, company scenarios, OPEC scenarios, they all show that we have a combination of solutions. The difference is how much of each solution. So biofuels are there, lots of biofuels in the International Energy Agency, in the Brazilian scenarios, lots of biofuels. In the IRENA, a little bit more because they put a little bit more, in IRENA a little bit less because they account for more renewable electricity, but biofuels are there as well. So all scenarios show the importance of biofuels towards a net zero future. The debate is maybe how much, but in all of them, we need to advance. And Brazil can contribute a lot. Why? Because we already have the technology. We already know the whole value chain. We've been doing this for quite a while. So we take for granted that we have almost 30% of our transportation fleet is already renewable because of biofuels, because of ethanol and biodiesel in mandates in our diesel and gasoline and ethanol and so ever. So it was not an easy task to accomplish, to already have that much renewability. And even for Brazil, that has a very renewable electricity system, already has a very renewable transportation system, we still have half of our emissions related to energy on transportation. So and we count for with biofuels a lot to accomplish for that. We already have we still have 30% of our energy related emissions within the industrial sector. And again, lots of industries hard to abate, where biomass, biochar, for instance, could play a very important role in combining a sustainable solution with lower costs. And what Brazil has been doing, besides showing the way, is using the Brazil's presidency at COP, Clean Energy Ministerial, and G20 to build consensus on very important topics. So I would like to stress out, and it has everything to do with biofuels, our three main priorities in the G20 energy transition working. The first one, financing energy transition. And when we debate financing energy transition, it's not only the whole rich countries should pay for the investment. It's how do we actually de-risk investment? How do we address and build capacity within each country to deal with its own realities, to be able to plan for its own future? And I like to say a lot. So allow countries to find solutions for their own problems instead of importing solutions for problems that they do not have. Biofuels, the bioenergy, they are a great solution for most countries in the global south. And they are a very, very good solution for most countries in the global north. So keeping the debate fragmented on oh, I accept this, I do not accept that, it's not productive for the climate debate. The second priority that we posed was just transition, addressing energy poverty. And again, biofuels play a very important role because they provide cheap solutions, or cheapest than the available ones. And we must remember that most countries, most developing countries, they have still many challenges regarding poverty, energy access, health, education. So they have they have constraints on resource allocation and the ability to just give huge amounts of subsidies to very, very expensive technologies. And again, we see very good examples, not only from Brazil, but for India, for instance, on how biofuels can provide a solution regarding a just energy transition. And so there's that. And the third one is actually precisely directly to biofuels, which is innovative perspectives on sustainable fuels, where we are discussing the whole carbon accounting debate, trying to reach consensus again to show that when you do the math, biofuels are a pretty good solution, better than most. Ethanol car in Brazil is far more sustainable than an electricity car in Germany. Far more, if you account for the whole carbon intensity in the life cycle. An ethanol car in Brazil is as sustainable as an electricity car in Brazil. And I would remind you that Brazil has over 90% electricity in its electricity matrix, 90% renewability. So we already generate our electricity with more than 90% of renewables. And still, if you do the math, an ethanol car is as sustainable as an electric car. And we do not have the whole emissions related to the minerals to debate. So again, when we think about biomethane, before Renata gets mad with me because I forget biogas, it's a very clear technological pathway for industrial decarbonization, cheaper than hydrogen, and it delivers emission reduction, and it uses residues. So it's usually address sanitation problems, gives upside to sanitation investments in developing countries. If we do biomethane from the agribusiness, we use residues. So we use something that would already have to be treated. Lots of advantages. So what Brazil can do and what we are doing is being more vocal in showing the world what a great solution we have in bioenergy. We are already very vocal about that. When we launched the Fuel of the Future bill, I was there in the ceremony, and in my speech, I said, bioenergy is the great strength of the Brazilian energy strategy, but it can be the great strength and the great solution for the global energy transition challenge. So, and I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elo. Very, very straight to the point, as always, and very important discussion and debate. And I usually say not only biofuels as fuel, but also both, for example, the biochar and the biomethane, they are not energetic, they are not fuels, they are using as feedstock they can be used as feedstock in many industrial processes. So it's not only biofuel, it's also feedstock. Gerhard, if you want to add before I die myself here.
Well, happy to. So an idea has sort of bubbled up in, somebody help her, please. Anyway, so an idea has bubbled up in the conversation around, I think, uh, the idea of, well, how much biomass are we talking about? Right? I mean, we have a finite amount of land, therefore we have a finite amount of biomass. Now, I believe that we haven't even tried to optimize how much biomass we can get from the land. I mean, in truth, we haven't even tried. In addition to the biogas point, there are so many waste streams that are just, organic waste streams, biogenic carbon waste streams, either from natural processes or human processes, where there's so much carbon that is produced and then is released into the atmosphere, right? That's why we have that sawtooth pattern that we see on the plots of carbon in the atmosphere every year, is because there's so much biomass that is just nature just puts back into the atmosphere. And so we should be able to catch that biomass before it goes back in, and we can use that intelligently. Okay, that's fine. But the number that we use is a number that comes from the International Energy Agency that says that in 2050, in a net zero scenario, that approximately 20% of energy production is biogenic. And so that's a good rule of thumb. And right now we're somewhere around 3% or 5% or something like that. So there's a long way that we can go in the eyes of many international experts in how much biomass that we should use. But there's another point that I want to make,
Yep.
which is that well, how do we get that biomass into the system? And this is in a sense related to the use of hydrogen. So if we look at a modern refinery, fossil fuel refinery, there are all sorts of flows of molecules in that. So you have a crude oil comes out, crude oil goes in. We have to take the sulfur out of that. Sometimes we have to do cracking. Cracking can either use or produce hydrogen. So sometimes we need to have hydrogen available. And so if you look at a modern refinery, hydrogen is a fundamental part of a modern refinery. And I think that's the proper use of hydrogen, where hydrogen is produced and consumed immediately. And so you can think about hydrogen for other applications like industry, making steel, making cement. It should be produced and consumed immediately. The idea of hydrogen as some sort of energy carrier has a lot of problems, like a lot of problems, like basic physics. I learned, my background is in physics and biology, molecular biophysics. Turns out that, and I've taught quantum mechanics. So it turns out that the hydrogen molecule is so small, it can tunnel into steel containers. And I mean, quantum mechanically tunnel, through the quantum mechanical process. And so as a result, you end up with hydrogen in the container walls, which makes them brittle. And what happens when the hydrogen container pops? It's really bad. You can see the video from New Jersey in 1930s with the Hindenburg. And I mean, I'm being very earnest. I'm not making light of this. The worst thing that would happen to the energy transition is if hydrogen gas stations started to cause injuries to people. So hydrogen is an incredibly useful molecule, but we need to produce it and use it immediately. And the other thing is that when we have all of this refinery infrastructure, we need to transition that refinery infrastructure so that it can accept very diverse sources of carbon. Carbon that comes from carbon capture, carbon that comes from collected biomethane from either landfill or from digesters. And that can and we need to develop the process where we go out into the field or we go out into the managed forest and we collect biomass in a sustainable way and turn it into a sustainable biocrude that we can then deliver to these refineries. And there's technological challenges related to the presence of oxygen and the acidity that comes along with the modern biomass, but we're smart, we can figure that out. Okay, so what's the point? The point is the future energy system is heterogeneous. And this goes against the grain of how people like to think about things. So people, policymakers, politicians, everybody would rather, I mean, they'd want to live their lives. They want to go to concerts and they want to buy sports cars and they want to, go dancing. They want to think about, they want other people to think about this. So they want a very simple solution. Solar is going to solve everything. No, sorry, solar's not going to solve everything. Hydrogen, that's going to no. And what we need is and there's people on this call that are thinking about the energy system as an interconnected system. And the thing is it's already how it works. This is how refineries work. Stuff comes in, steam, methane, reforming, all kinds of different products come out. We can do this. But it requires an openness and it requires a confidence. And where does confidence come from? Well, there's two types of people. If you people, I'm just going to go crazy. If you people know your Myers-Briggs, you know that there's N's and there's S's. And N's are like, oh, okay, I can read about it, I can visualize it, they're fine. S's, they have to see it in front of their face. And most politicians are S's. Most politicians, they can't think about it. They're too busy anyway. So we have to put it in their face. And so that's what we need deployment and we need wins. And so the priority for the international community should be about demonstration, and more demonstration. And frankly, I know we need more innovation, but when countries say, oh, and we commit to investing in new technology, that's kicking the can down the road. We need people to deploy, and then we pick them up and we carry them and we show them like they're toddlers. Like, look at the big doggy, look at the bioplant. And this is how Brazil is helping. And the problem is that there's a lot of the critics, they don't travel, they don't see it, they don't look at it, they don't understand that it all works. And so the more that we can do together to convince people that it works, the better. But the other thing to realize, and one of your allies in all of this is actually Fuels Europe. So Fuels Europe is the the Professional Refinery Association in Europe. Brazil should be reading their documents because their documents are very clear. We're going to need liquid fuels for a long time. We need to invest in the infrastructure. We need to convert our current refineries, like Eni is converting to biorefineries. We need more of those conversions, and we do need to overcome some of the handling issues related to biomass to produce these biocrudes. But what do you get when you produce a biocrude? You get a biochar. So then you put that biochar right back in the ground where you got it, and there's a way to do all of this. But we as a community need to be convincing the world to think big and to think interconnected.
Yeah, this is all very makes me think, Gerd, a lot. As we are approaching the end of our super hyper discussion here, I will not make my final comments in the end. I will make my final comments right now very quickly, which is on top of that, profiting of all these bio chances that we have can also place Brazil and other developing in several stages countries to be able to produce lower emissions goods, manufacturing goods, and start supply the world with lower manufacturing goods, because this has a double effect there. It helps to decarbonize the world, which is good, because some geographies, they are not sustainable in per se. As you mentioned, we have to think outside the boundaries. And also it helps to create jobs and value in other geographies, and other geographies other than the traditional ones. And this is quite important for us also to aim to any kind of peace in the world. I'm not Miss Universe. I'm not preaching for the peace, the world peace, but I see that creating value, opportunities for the youth, and rethinking a little bit the way we think development may also help to bring some kind of light and peace to some geographies that are now without a lot of chances. With this, I please ask Laís, Gerd, Elo, and Renata to give 1 minute final remarks to leave with the key messages that you want to leave. Laís, starting from you.
Thank you again for this great opportunity to discuss and to have all these insights from our colleagues. It's always, like I said in the beginning, a great pleasure to be with them, and looking forward to meet them in Foz do Iguaçu. President Lula and Minister Silveira are always concerned about the social development, and to include the biofuels in the energy transition agenda is one of the top priorities, like Eloisa already described our 3 top priorities. So hopefully it's not going to be end in the G20 conversations, but we're going to approach this in the BRICS presidents next year, and also at the COP30, where we are looking forward also to host you in Belém do Pará. So anything you need and anything you want to discuss with the government, we're open-minded, Jared, and hopefully to have your help, and from the E+ as well, in all the discussions we're having in the Fuels of the Future implementation agenda. Thank you so much, and have all a great day today.
Renata?
Right. Well, what I'll say is just that we need to seize the moment. We are in a very important, very life-changing, it's for our survival. We need to seize the moment since Brazil is actually bringing this subject to the world, since we are having all of these events that Laís just mentioned, that's the time when you have to scale up, not scale up, but to raise the debate, to really try to get all of the options that we have to decarbonize without any prejudice, without any political. It's impossible to not have anything political, but as less as we can, and do it in order, if we really want to keep going in the direction that we are aiming.
Hello? You get.
Yeah, I'm here. So, main key takeaways. First one, I already said, we believe that bioenergy is a strength in the Brazilian energy strategy, and it definitely is a strength in fighting globally the climate change. Brazil has a very unique success in biofuels production already. We have a long history of ethanol. We have a very strong and steady history with biodiesel, but also in the use of biochar already, biochar for steel, for many other industries. So we can prove that the technology, it works, it scales up, and we can do it without negative land use change. So we can move away and beyond the old food versus fuel debate. The last point I would like to make is that the name Fuels of the Future, it's not casual. If you think about it, we give a strong signal on which is the future that we are seeing for Brazil. So not only traditional fuels like ethanol and biodiesel enhancing mandates, but including biomethane, sustainable aviation fuels, HVO, and including the debate of carbon capture, combined with the bioenergy, because we do see how important it is to address our targets, our emission targets, and the global emission target. So the name of the bill, it actually gives a sign on which is the future that we see. Not a future that's based only on electromobility, but it's a future that combines renewable electricity solutions with the fuels and the feedstocks, as Rosanna brilliantly pointed out, that we still need. So, and the future is diverse. The future is diverse. We must account and allow for countries to choose from this different set of tools to reach its own targets. Thank you very much.
Gerhard, before passing you the last words, we had 2 questions from the audience. And as if we may just try to appoint, one is Ricky. He's asking, what are the current efforts to work with standards like GHG protocol or SBTI to create criteria for biofuels? This is often a hurdle for companies looking to switch to biofuels. Do you want to help answering this question, Gerhard, before your final comments?
Yes, so there is unfortunately, an informal group of industry leaders that is engaging with the GHG protocol and SBTI. And perhaps if the person asking the question can contact Hosanna, and I can put them in touch. I am actually at this point looking to make that process a little more formal. And we are looking to develop a more formal means for industry to engage the SBTI and the GHG protocol around biofuels. It has been led by a group called the RNG Coalition from the United States. Turns out that biomethane is sort of the one of the leading issues. And this guy, Sam Lair from the United States, has done a lot of, so I thought Renata, he's coming to FOS, Renata. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah, I know, we talked.
Yeah, okay, sure. Yeah, anyway, so this guy, Sam Lair, has done a really nice job organizing industry responses to what SBTI and GHG protocol are doing. And I understand from Sam that they're having a little bit of success, but there needs to be a more organized way. And then, like I said, one of the things that I think is going to change because of Brazil's leadership is that there will be more guidance from formal international processes on how to manage GHGs. But that will take time. That will take time.
Interesting. And now if you want, just give us your final words so that we can finish with a philosophical touch.
Well, many thanks for letting me join your conversation. Thank you for the positive feedback, and I look forward to seeing everybody in Brazil. And again, my sincere appreciation to both the industry, the government, and the institutions of Brazil that are leaning forward to bring the world forward on this. There's a lot of misunderstanding out there, and Brazil has been working hard on this. And I would say that one of the biggest problems on this topic is that the United States and Brazil are not collaborating enough on these topics. And we need to remove those roadblocks and have basically the Western Hemisphere can do this. So we should just do it. And then the next place
Agreed.
that should develop its bioeconomy is Sub-Saharan Africa. And I know that Brazil is interested in that. And I'm available to help with these conversations. Thank you.
Great. This brings our hot and thrilling discussion to an end. But this is not the end of it. I think this is the beginning or the several beginnings of this biofuels and biofeedstocks discussion. And Jorge and technical team just tell me when to end this presentation or this event. Okay. Thank you so